Later in this video, we are speaking to an FBI veteran and former hostage negotiator with details on the Nancy Guthrie case, but before we get into that, I want to provide some updates on where the case currently stands, because right now, this case is getting more confusing. We are now entering week 7 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, and despite new images and new theories and a growing reward, investigators are still struggling to identify a suspect. Now, according to News Nation, investigators are now zeroing in on 2 specific dates, January 11th and January 24th, suggesting that whoever abducted Nancy Guthrie may have been casing her home for weeks before she disappeared. Now, the FBI has been going door to door asking neighbors for any surveillance footage from those dates, but so far, it appears they've come up empty. Now, the FBI hasn't come out and said that they've identified a vehicle, and there's been no clear movement patterns and no identifiable suspect, which brings us to one of the most unsettling theories in this entire case. A neighbor, speaking to News Nation, said something that could completely change how you look at this. She said Nancy Guthrie had a security gate on her front door, now the kind that is nearly impossible to break through, and according to her, if that gate was locked, there's no way you're getting in. So that raises a major question. If someone didn't break in, how did they get inside? The same neighbor suggested that it's possible that someone was already inside the home, or that there were multiple people involved, potentially an accomplice who was able to unlock the door from within. Now, this somewhat lines up with what former FBI Special Agent Jen Coffindaffer told us the other day. Roll the clip.
The fact that they changed locks on the back, it makes me think that entry was made from the back, went through the garage, entered the home, and then the person that we see on video, his duty was actually to disable that camera. It made a lot of sense to me that there was a division of labor and that more than one person was involved.
Even the FBI behind the scenes is starting to acknowledge something difficult. Sources say the case is beginning to go cold because, as Steve Hooper, former special agent in charge at the Phoenix FBI field office, told us, all it takes is one person to slip up for the entire case to crack open. Roll the clip.
It's a matter of finding that one person, that one credible source. I guarantee the FBI's been tapping into their informants, their sources. If they knew anything, they would be providing it now.
Next, we're going to speak to an FBI veteran and former hostage negotiator, someone who has worked cases just like this, to break down what these clues really mean, what investigators could be missing, and whether this case is actually closer to being solved than it appears. Let's get into that. So today I'm joined by former FBI special agent and hostage negotiator Chip Massey, who's here to talk to us today about the Nancy Guthrie case. Mr. Massey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you, when you first heard about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, it's been about 7 weeks now, what stood out to you the most?
The things that stood out to me were how this guy approached. In the first time we see these images and that video, we see a guy that is trying to disguise his gait, right? Once he enters toward like the focal area of where that camera is, we see him slump, and we see him, his movements become a little bit strange and exaggerated. His arms drop to his side. He's hunched over, and then we see him doing that confusing movement on that step, right? You recall that he's turning around, he's pulling at foliage, he's holding that up to the camera. It looks indecisive. It looks like he's unsure of his movements. We see those thick gloves, right? Those thick medical looking style gloves. Again, those gloves match with that weapon don't make sense. He's not going to be able to manipulate that weapon in a way that carries any type of proficiency. The way it's positioned on him, right? And you've heard this before. I mean, it's in his front pelvic area. Anyone can reach to that weapon and grab it. So it's like he's almost offering it. And then you have the problem with the blood on that front stoop. And to me, that is a danger signal for 2 reasons. One, obviously, Nancy's been injured, horrible. And what happened inside to cause that injury. But it also shows me is a lack of planning. Somebody who wasn't ready for the moment, who didn't anticipate that there would be a struggle. And so why wouldn't there be a struggle, right? She's confronted with a nightmare. She wakes up and she sees somebody in a ski mask in front of her, right? I can't imagine the amount of terror that was present. So I can call him unprofessional all day and say he wasn't prepared or trained or smart enough perhaps to handle this. But he's still not in custody. So to me, again, that's why I say a head scratcher. There's some things that make sense, some things don't.
Right. Now, it sounds like, you're almost building somewhat of a profile on this person or people that did this. I want to ask you, ransom notes were sent out to a variety of Tucson media outlets, and also us. These ransom notes were not sent directly to the family. What does that tell you about the person or people that committed this crime?
Well, couple things. One would be that their at least their communication techniques might be a little bit more sophisticated. So if they're trying to disguise the IP, if they're trying to, make this less direct, involve other outlets, maybe to get one as a way to broadcast this message instantly, so that it wouldn't be something that people would try to cover up. But again, it also shows that there is some degree of technical knowledge when dealing with the delivery of these kind of messages. But again, it sure caused the public to be aware of it. It wasn't something that the family would go directly to authorities and say, can you help us with this? It was, in other words, it seems like the captors did want this to be publicized for some reason.
Now, the FBI has said that there's been no direct contact with the kidnappers, and the deadlines that they had stated in these notes have since passed. And I'm just wondering what that breakdown in communication says to you.
Well, the change that we saw in the Guthrie videos, first we saw the way Savannah was addressing, it seemed like, the abductor, in her choice of language, and the way she was saying things like, "You're not alone. We understand. It's still not too late to do the right thing." All things that are appealing directly to the captor. Now, that is a linkage that's important because we want these captors to know that they're responsible for the health and safety and well-being of Nancy while they're in her care. It puts them on notice for that. That's an important element. Not only for them to remind them that this is our mother. This is a matriarch in our family, extremely important person. We love and adore her, and we need her back so we can celebrate. But we saw a break from that, right? We saw a break from her addressing the captors, and then in the video that follows those, is she's speaking directly to the American people, and she's saying, if you have seen something unusual, maybe you know who this individual is, right? All those things pointing to there was been a substantial break in the community, either the communication or deadlines or proof of life that have passed. And they meant something. It's something that was so important that Nancy said, rather, Savannah said, we're going to move off from this and we're going to change direction. So that's the change that I see.
Now, it's interesting that you bring up the videos because what I'm wondering is, Savannah came out on social media and offered to pay the ransom. How unusual is that in a case like this?
Well, videos that is broadcast to the public, hugely unusual, right? We have the case of celebrity, we have a medically fragile person. We also have an older person. So all these things, highly unusual, right? The only thing that I can compare this to in terms of historical perspective, Jakson, is the Lindbergh baby. In that case, you have celebrity, right? Charles Lindbergh, huge figure of his time in historical perspective. And we have a baby, also a medically fragile, being. So those are the only things that I can think of. Now, the fact that she was saying to them, we will pay, again, another indicator that something has changed in the direction of things. She was, something happened for her to say that. And, it could be a number of things. It could have been that the captor told her something only Nancy would know, perhaps that the family provided, right? Something that would indicate for them proof of life.
If You were able to get into contact with the person who committed this crime and negotiate with them. Let's say Nancy is actually no longer with us, unfortunately. Could you give us some examples of some methods you would utilize to try and bring Nancy or her remains home?
Well, I think the way that the family's going about it right now is the way to go. I mean, they have offered everything. They have offered to pay. They have offered for them to pay in a way that wouldn't be traced back to them. They have given them essentially a carte blanche to please lead us to our mother, and they have said it is possible. We understand it's possible that she's no longer with us. We want you still to provide this information to us. You got to put yourself in the mindset of an abductor. And let's say that, understand the amount of stress that's present. Like I said, talk about that amygdala hijack, right? But magnify that times about 1 billion, because you have now the national attention on you, right? There's billboards around there that say if you've seen something, there's $1 million reward. People now have 1 million reasons to come forward to say, I've noticed something. The fact that there is such a high reward out there, if there's somebody that's sitting on the fence, if there's somebody that is weighing what they should do, $1 million is life changing for a lot of people. That can buy them freedom. It can buy them an escape route and a different life from where they might be with this captor. So, an associate, somebody in his inner circle, somebody that might just be on the outside of that. Those are all people that this kind of outreach, the way they are responding to them, is 100% the way to go.
You've evidently studied this case intimately, considering your thoughts on the way the gun is holstered and how the person on the Nest doorbell was acting. Um, I know I'm asking you to shotgun here, but if you could, in your own opinion, um, kind of craft a profile on the people that did this, what would that be? Who do you think committed this crime? What does their lifestyle look like? Did they plan this for weeks? Did they case the house before going in for weeks? Can you kind of give us an idea of what you think the person, their mindset, and their lifestyle might be like?
It's interesting that the investigators are looking at a couple dates, right? They went back and recanvassed, and they asked about, I believe it's January 11th.
January 11th and January 24th. Yeah.
There we go. And that's significant because there's likely been some kind of information, some type of evidence, either in interviews or something captured on another camera or something that correlated when there was a bunch of interviews done and they got this information back. And here's what I mean. They would have asked neighbors, anyone in that area, did you see anything unusual anytime recently? So now we have more images, perhaps. We saw that again, imagery of cars that we hadn't seen before that were in the area around that same time period, the night she was abducted. What I like about that is that it allows the investigators to go and ask for a very pointed date. And that's what I really like about this, is that they have information about a specific date. There's a reason why they have that, right? Now they're going back and they've asked those neighbors, do you remember anything unusual about this time frame? Whether did you lose internet connectivity? Do you see was there a strange blackout in your coverage? Did your dogs bark about anything? People will start putting things together and say, I remember I happened to look out my window around that time and I thought I saw this car and it looked a little out of place. And so now they're putting these kind of things together. So we have that. But for this person, again, the way they moved on that stoop, they were in that house for 41 minutes that we're aware of. 41 minutes. Again, this is not a professional takedown.
Mhm.
This is somebody that doesn't know how to handle the situation that's in front of them. So to me, at least in the respect of the art, the format of what it takes to kidnap, to abduct somebody, I got to put them way down on the list of professionalism. Now, when we're talking about an ability for somebody to be okay to handle violence, we're talking about, think about this, the mental makeup of somebody that is willing to do this. You're going to enter somebody's house, you're breaking and entering, and you're there for to abduct somebody. That takes a whole different set of mind, because now you're comfortable with violence, and you're comfortable with violence against a medically fragile older woman. Did this person have information about what was going on inside there? Absolutely yes. There's no way that, from what we saw on that stoop, that they would have approached that without it. We also have some information that it sounds like they were in that area previously, whether those dates or another time when investigators were asking about, did your internet coverage go out? So these things are all pointing to a degree of planning. There's that, to a point, and also a conspirator. Because how in the world do they get a body out of a house without somebody having a car that is coming up as well? They couldn't park, it wouldn't make sense for them to park the car right out front, right? That would be too noticeable. So there are things and dynamics to me that indicate there's that. Now, the backpack, they go in with a full backpack. It's pretty clear, at least from what we're able to tell from those video stills. And if you're going in with a full backpack, you're not thinking of a cash grab, right? You go in with an empty backpack if that's the case, because you've got a fence. You've got somebody that's ready to move the jewelry for you, not without a problem. You're getting cash that you might think is in the house, but you're coming out with a person. It doesn't work. It doesn't match up for that kind of criminal activity. So I think somebody whose mindset is they're okay with high degree of violence and a huge amount of risk. I mean, the timing, everything has to be perfect for this to work. Now, clearly, not everything worked out for them, but enough has. In fact, that's why we're talking, because this person was able to pull this off without us to have enough evidence to track who and where they are. So, so there's that.
It's interesting that you bring up the internet connection. Well, that seems like it's an interesting point of reference for you. Why would you question if their internet connection went out? Are you hypothesizing that they somehow had a way to cut off the internet connection so the cameras wouldn't work, perhaps?
There is some conjecture out there, right, that they had jammers, right? That they might have used a jammer to commit this crime. They're saying that the camera, at least closer to Nancy's house of a neighbor's, also went out. No information available, I think, was what the neighbor said when they went back over their coverage. So so part of that conjecture is that they were using some type of jammer to eliminate some of that risk. But it also begs the question then, how were we able to recover any photographic imaging, right, from that? So it's not uncommon for criminals. I know it's very common on the West Coast, especially like in their city like LA, for that they use jammers all the time to defeat this kind of thing. But again, we have to say some of that doesn't match up either.
Chip, thank you so much for joining me today. You've been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And hey, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And at the end here, if there's anything you want to promote, like I see there's a book behind you, Convince Me. If you want to promote that, or maybe a social media handle, podcast, anything, now's your time.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, I wrote a book with my co-founder of the convincing company called Convince Me, available on Amazon, and our website, Convince Me, is all about our crisis communications business. So
Awesome. All right. Thanks a ton, Chip.
thank you.
Let us know if you guys want to see any more interviews just like the one you just saw. We read every single comment, so make sure to drop one down below. As always, I'm Jakson Buhaj, and I will see you in the next one.